So Super Rugby round 15, 4 matches on the Saturday, 2 Trans-Tasman matches between Chiefs, Waratahs and Reds, Highlanders. Then we've got Bulls, Brumbies, which is South Africa, on Australia, and then a good old-fashioned South African derby with the Stormers taking on the Lions in Cape Town. We'll start with the first one, the Chiefs against the Waratahs. The Chiefs are back at home after their tour of South Africa. They came back with 5 points, which I think they're pretty happy with, especially seeing as that second game they were without a lot of their big guns. For the Waratahs, they just broke the New Zealand hoodoo, which is against the Australian team, so they finally got a win over a New Zealand team. Some people are still questioning it, given it was 15-14 for much of that game, with the Highlanders getting a red card. So I guess this is a chance for them to silence some critics. For the Chiefs, good news. The All Blacks players who they were missing in that last game are back. So we got Harris and Retallick back in the forwards. Damien McKenzie is back at 10. Ngatai and Anton Leonard-Brown get a start in the midfield, which is good because I don't think they've been paired together this season. Alamalo moves to 15. Weber gets the start over Tahuri Orangi at 9, but Tahuri Orangi is on the bench. For the Waratahs, not much in the way of changes after a pretty good outing last week. So Phipps gets the start ahead of Gordon, I guess going for a bit more experience over in Hamilton. That's the only change to starting 15. For the Chiefs, they're more than 10 points behind the Crusaders and the Canes. So one of them is going to lose tonight because they're playing each other unless it's a draw. But either way, there's room here for the Chiefs to kind of narrow that gap, although it is perhaps looking like a bridge too far this far through the season. But also they need to be wary of the other teams around them. So they're on the same points as the Highlanders, and they're only a couple of points ahead of the Jaguares. So they probably do need to win just to kind of keep themselves as high as they can possibly be on the ladder. For the Waratahs, at the moment they're kind of sitting pretty in the Australian Conference. They're comfortably ahead of the Rebels. But the Rebels are playing a somewhat depleted Sunwolves team tonight, so it's quite possible that that gap will be significantly narrowed down. So, man, if they can make it 2 on the bounce, it not only puts them ahead into the Australian Conference, but also gives them a bit more credibility just in terms of the Super Rugby as a whole. Because at the moment people are saying whoever matches up with the Waratahs or whoever wins the Aussie Conference is getting the easiest deal of all the playoff matches. So if they can, get a win over the Chiefs in New Zealand, that would kind of, I guess, dampen down that conversation. But yeah, the bookies are pretty much saying one swallow doesn't make a summer. So one win over a New Zealand team does not suddenly make the Aussie teams all fantastic, because they are picking the Chiefs by 9 points. I guess with their All Blacks back, they're going to be a different prospect, but we will see what happens. The next one, Reds taking on the Highlanders over in Brisbane. Reds somewhat disrupted this week with the news that James Slipper has tested positive for cocaine usage, which is not ideal. I understand he's going through some mental health issues, which is pretty unfortunate, pretty hard stuff to deal with. So hopefully he's on the mend. Obviously, the cocaine usage in the Reds camp, it's not the first time. When Carmichael Hunt not that long ago was done for the same thing. So I don't know if it's a culture thing, if it's just a couple of guys getting out of hand, or what's going on there. But yeah, it's definitely not what the Reds needed in their build-up to this week, although Slipper was out last week as well, obviously with the same kind of stuff, although it wasn't publicly available at that point. But yeah, in terms of their rugby, they had a good showing against the Canes last week, so that's encouraging. But they're another team who really struggles to kind of show us what kind of team they are, because one week they get humbled by the Sunwolves, and then the next week they put in a pretty good shift against the Canes. So it's really difficult to know. They're back at home at Suncorp, so hopefully they can give the fans there something to cheer about. For the Highlanders, it was a pretty big loss last week to an Aussie team, so there's been a fair bit of talk about them from the other New Zealand conference fans, giving them a bit of grief about being the team that dropped the ball, but there's a chance for them to kind of make amends this week. For the Reds, 2 changes. See Izzy Parisi come onto the right wing, and Harry Hawkins gets his first Super Rugby start, so we'll see how he goes. The impressive Daugunu is out of the 23 altogether. I'm not sure if he's also done something to incur the ire of head coach Brad Thorne, or if it's just that they've gone with a 6-2 split on the bench and there's no room for him. So it's only Sorovi and Toa in the backs, reserves, all the rest are forwards. I guess that's a game plan that the Reds are going to go with this week. Hitting it up in the forwards probably fits with his philosophy. For the Highlanders, they've pretty much decided to rest all their All Blacks. Not all of them, like Naholo's still playing, but there's no Ben Smith, no Coltman, no Frizzell or Whitelock. Aaron Smith is starting from the bench, but Liam Squire is also back on the bench, and Buckman is also back on the bench. Lynchy starts at 6, Tua starts at 8, Walden is back in the midfield, which is always good news. Josh McKay gets his debut at fullback, so yeah, it's a bit of a changed lineup for the Highlanders, so we'll see how they go. For the Reds, if they show up, then they're always a chance, and especially with all these All Blacks out for the Highlanders. But yeah, they're prone to kind of having an off week, so flip a coin and see which one shows up this week. For the Highlanders, they definitely have a bit of rep to recover, and they're in the same situation as the Chiefs, that they're behind the Crusaders and the Canes, not that far ahead of some other like non-New Zealand conference teams, so definitely need to put some points on. For the bookies, it's the Highlanders by 11, so despite having the All Blacks out, still pretty comfortable winners. Bulls Brumbies is the third one. 2 kind of fallen giants of Super Rugby, 2 teams which have both won the comp on multiple occasions. The Bulls kind of trying to get their way back into the top echelons of the comp. The Brumbies at the moment just really trying to stop the bleeding. For the Bulls, Berger Oldendahl is back, so that is good news. Pollard shifts back into 10. Visaki and Strauss rotate, so Visaki starts this week in the number 2 jersey. Nick Diaka gets a start as well, so Bowley's on the bench. And there's a couple of new faces, especially the prop Basson, who is, I believe, in line for a Super Rugby debut if he comes on. For the Brumbies, only 2 changes, kind of enforced really. So Inova is in for the suspended Rory Arnold, and McCaffrey, who I've thought has actually been pretty impressive this season, is in for the injured Valtini. That guy cannot catch a break with injuries. For the Bulls, the playoffs are still within sight, so a win against the Brumbies would be most welcome. If they keep kind of going in this pattern of win one, lose one, you can see that kind of 8th spot may just kind of drift away from them. So we'll see if they can get some consistency going. It'll be a good time to start now. For the Brumbies, they did impress for 60 minutes last week, but after Arnold went off, it kind of, it all went downhill from there. So penalty count was too high, and they definitely need all their guys on the field against the Bulls. The bookies have got the Bulls by 9, so it looks to be another hard day at the office for the Brumbies, but the Bulls will still have to be on their game because the Brumbies are a pushover by no means. Last one, Stormers Lions. So it's top and bottom of South African Conference. I don't know if anyone would have picked that at the start of the season, but as I always go on about, Stormers' injury list has been pretty bad all season, and their schedule has not been very kind, highlighted by that pretty disappointing loss over by the Sunwolves to the Sunwolves last week in Hong Kong. So we'll see if that travel is a factor for the Stormers this week. Rassie Erasmus has probably pretty much already decided his Springbok squad, but there's probably a bit of, I guess, justification needed to be done by some of these Stormers guys if they get selected. So they'll definitely want to put in a good shift, even if the playoffs are looking a bit out of reach for them at the minute. For the Stormers, Khaleesi starts. Peter Steph-Toy is ill, I believe, so Jan de Klerk gets the start in the second row. Mbanambi and Kitshoff are back on the bench, so they've both been out with injury, so it's good to have them back. For the Lions, it's a pretty big change this week, so 7 changes. Dianti is back on his preferred wing position, so that's good. Forster and Ron Janse van Rensburg return to the midfield, so that's also pretty good news. You'd have to say that's probably preferable. The front row gets rotated as the Lions are prone to do this season. Smith and Schoeman both get starts with Mostert at 7. So I guess the Stormers are going to have to be careful at ruck time with 2 kind of fetchers on the field. Stormers, yeah, their season's pretty much gone to custard, hasn't it? It's not been great. But I guess if you're going to make, kind of like the Blues last week trying to get one over the Crusaders, if you are going to make the fans happy and give them something to cheer about, a win over the Lions would certainly kind of heighten their spirits of what's been a pretty poor season. For the Lions, they are definitely under threat in that South African conference. You look at the table and think they're comfortably ahead, but they have played a game more. So realistically, they're only 2 or 3 points ahead of the Jaguares, 3 or 4 ahead of the Sharks. So it's not all that easy for them at the minute. They need to get a win pretty big time. And the Stormers have been hard to beat at home. Only one team's managed it so far this season. The bookies have got the Lions by 4 points. So pretty much saying that the Lions will sneak one. But yeah, by no means going to be easy. And the Lions with 7-6 being their record, 7 wins, 6 losses, have by no means been kind of a dominant team totally this season. For some games they have, other games they've looked kind of off colour. Right, what do you guys think is likely to happen with these ones? Are any of these going to match the Hurricanes Crusaders in intensity? I guess we will see. Let me know your thoughts, and yeah, hopefully it's a good weekend of rugby. Catch you again soon. See you later.